Right, so welcome to another conversation, and this one's a bit of a barbecue because David's about to get roasted. No, I'm joking. So, for anyone that doesn't know David, or maybe like David in a minute, you can introduce yourself a bit. But
Sure.
David's a vegan YouTuber, does animal rights work, and we know each other personally. We're friends, and recently we did a hike together, which was, shall we say, shorter than expected, but for reasons that we will not go into. And on that hike, we
Wait,
um,
that sounds like that leaves a lot of room for people to make their own conclusions.
yeah,
Let's
broke
ju
back turkey.
Yeah. Yeah, but the injury, let's just leave it at
Yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah,
we don't need to go into details. And
yeah,
someone, not me, got injured, so that's why we had
yeah.
to
On a part of the body that we will not name. No, no, I'm
Oh,
joking.
man.
Anyway, so on that hike, obviously, we were talking about loads of different subjects, and obviously, antinatalism came up,
Mhm,
and David had some, I think, more like practical points rather than about the philosophy. It's more about like
mhm,
how it would practically sort of work out in reality. Would it be, better for it to be widespread or sort of, promoted? And we thought we'd do like a discussion and put it out there. So
mhm.
actually, I'm going to be the one that's going to get roasted. Um, but yeah, do you just want to go into your things? Do you want to like
Yeah.
introduce yourself a bit first as well?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I'm David Rams. I do have a YouTube channel, David Rams, my name. I also have a second YouTube channel called The Rams Den, which is where I do this kind of stuff, actually, what we're doing here. But the main channel is veganism focused, second channel is mainly veganism, but also other topics as well. That's what I'm doing. And there's also some other stuff I'm doing, like private projects, animal rights, veganism. This is what I'm into. And I wanted to come on here because, yeah, we had those discussions, and I've got some, like, so where I stand with antinatalism is I have no skin in the game. I'll make that clear. I don't have any kids. I've never spent my life dreaming about having kids. I've also never despised the idea of having kids. Although when I was younger, I was like, I don't think I would want to do that anytime soon. But it's never been one way or the other for me. So I'm quite malleable on this topic. I'm very open to either side of it, either side of this debate. So yeah, to be clear, I have no skin in the game, and that's kind of where I want to start really before we get into this, because I feel like there is a bit of a mismatch between you and I on this point, in
Yeah.
that I don't have a vasectomy, I don't have kids, and I've never dreamed of having kids. Like, I've got no skin in the game, but you
Mm.
do. You've had a vasectomy, and you are very you're adamant on you're so convinced by your point. So starting there really
Yeah.
is there any chance in any world that you would ever change your mind, or is this are you too fully committed to ever consider ever changing your mind? Because I'm completely I'm
Yeah.
I've just said I'm malleable. So, like, where do you stand on that?
Well, so I could give like two answers, right? So the first one is more like about my past, which makes it sound like it was like a weird past. But no, it was like actually a very normal past. So like up until the age of 20, I was the complete opposite of what I am now. I was like I think I can't remember if I mentioned this when we were hiking,
Uh-huh.
but I was like very much I was the opposite of you when you were a kid. I centered my life around having kids. Like I really
Okay.
wanted kids. I wanted like I'd planned it out. I wanted 3.
Okay.
I wanted them to learn a second language because I was embarrassed that I only knew English and I'm still
Yeah.
fucking struggling with that.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I was very much like I didn't really care if I had like an amazing job. Really wanted kids. Like I based like a lot of stuff around that.
Right.
Um, and then I changed my mind to antinatalism
Yeah.
through, I don't need to go through the whole story, but talking to people about it and stuff like that. And
Sure.
I changed my mind on like an intellectual level, but I
Mhm.
still emotionally wanted kids, and it's taken time for that.
Yeah.
Like emotional attachment to the idea of having your own kids to fade away. I would say now it's pretty much faded away. Like I would, if I still like the idea of raising someone, but
Mhm.
it would be like through adoption if I was going to do that.
Right.
But if I'm going to be completely honest, if I think about the way my life is going to go, obviously I can't predict it. I probably won't like raise anyone because I just
Yeah.
think I could probably do better stuff without raising someone.
Sure.
Um, But then, so the other thing is with the vasectomy and stuff. So now maybe someone could say, okay, well now you've kind of locked yourself in, so maybe you'd be a bit overly defensive or whatever because now you've sort of
Mm,
committed. And I agree. Like, that is like something that I could be prone to, but I think, and I don't know how to describe it, but I would just probably say that I don't think that influences my opinion because like I I had my strong views before I got the vasectomy. That was why I got
mhm,
the vasectomy.
mhm.
So it wasn't like I got it and then they came around as a sort of defense mechanism. But also,
No,
I have like sort of changed my mind on things a bit since having the vasectomy. Not on, I still am just as committed an antinatalist, but I am now less sort of, um, I care more about doing good in other places now.
right.
I don't know if you saw my conversation with John. If you didn't, I won't be butthurt.
John, no.
No, so I had like a conversation with John on one of my other videos where he was saying like
You're
he's
talking about Johnny
antinatal.
right now, sorry.
No, 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 it's not
Okay,
Johnny. It's not
okay,
Johnny. No, 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 different John, different John.
sure.
I don't think you'll know this guy. He's vegan, but I don't know if you'd cross paths.
Alright.
And he is antinatalist as well, but he thinks that actually trying to stop people from having kids or convince them not to have kids
Mhm.
is not where we should be putting our effort. We should be putting it in things like promoting like the abolition of stuff like factory farms,
Yeah,
animal use in general,
right,
also helping wild animals, because he thinks those are more pressing issues, which I actually agree with him on.
right.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's sort of more waffle than.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really answer the question, I'll be honest. It was good information, but I don't know how it
Yeah, I think it answered the question because I was
I mean,
saying
it's a
like
yes or no question though.
no,
Like, would you like, are you willing to change your mind if
okay, yes, yeah, yeah.
oh, that's it, that's that,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
cool,
think I
that's
already
all.
have, yeah, which is I was that's why I was giving those things as like an example.
I appreciate the info though. It was good that did help me kind of well, it helps me moving forward, but like, yeah,
Okay.
we didn't glad we got the answer as well,
I'll
that's
teed you
helpful.
up to smack me down later.
I just wanna make sure that, like, because 'cause I'm about to explain my points, and I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that we're actually able to, that it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, 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 yeah.
completely locked in on your side, even though I understand there's gonna be some barriers because you literally had a vasectomy. I mean, like, let's not overlook that.
Mm.
Because of how strongly you believe what you believe, you went to a doctor and you said, "Hey, doctor, I don't need this. There is nothing wrong with me, but I want you to make something wrong with me. I want you to stop something on my body from functioning properly because I have an ideology." That's how strongly you believe in what you believe in. So I just wanted to
Okay,
make
but
sure,
let me
that
ask you a question. If you could do the equivalent for veganism, would you do that?
no, absolutely not. Would I get an
Oh,
operation so that I couldn't digest meat or something? No, I just go with my ideology that, like, I don't need the operation. I'll just
no, no,
continue
but
the way I continue.
knowing that in the future you
Yeah,
could be, because I think it's slightly different with veganism, is that with antinatalism, with having a kid,
yeah,
like hormones comes into it, and when
yeah.
as you get older, those hormones can sort of overcome your better judgment.
Mate, I
So
think that's I don't know about that, man.
I th-
I don't I mean, I think the hormones are strongest when you're a teenager. I don't think you get to, like, 35,
no.
36, and you're just like, "Oh, I just wanna fuck everyone and have a baby."
No, that does fucking happen. That happens to so many people.
Look, you
Ha
have the urges and temptations, I get that,
mm,
but as a vegan, I understand what those feel like, and I will never give in to them no matter what, and because I know that as I'm convinced of the ethics and I wouldn't
mm.
put any animal through that. So if as an antinatalist, if you're convinced of the ethics as you are, which we'll get into, then I don't see the need for surgical intervention. But I would say if you did get the surgical intervention, that makes you far, far, far less likely to change your mind if somebody presents an argument that's, convincing.
Not
That's what I was
not
getting
necess
at.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I don't think necessarily so. I can see why it would come off like that, but I don't think that's the case. I would say
Okay.
I'm I'm just as open-minded to change my mind now,
Cool. Well, that's useful. That's
than
all I wanted
before.
to get to. Just wanted to make
Okay,
sure.
cool.
So,
Well,
all
I'm
right.
glad we sorted that out.
Yeah. So what all right, let's start here. I've got my kind of like
Yeah.
ideas and stuff. So first off, I want to just define a few things. This is what that's the first thing I wanted to get into. Second thing would be, so I don't need you to speak for antinatalism in general because I'm
Mm.
talking to you, right? So what exactly is the your goal of in your eyes of antinatalism, like what your work you want to achieve? What exactly do you want to achieve with it?
Okay, so about my specific work, what I wanna do as an individual.
No, but like not exactly, like not like your YouTube or whatever, but your views on antinatalism, what goal are you leading to? So for example, me with veganism, when I talk about veganism, my goal is that I want a world where animal using animals for our selfish bullshit is no longer a thing we want to do. I want people to
Yeah.
not want to do it. I want people to look at an animal and say, "Hey, I could use you for something." But I'm not going to because I don't believe that's the right thing to do. Or I could kill
Yeah.
you for a burger, but I know it would taste great, but I'm not going to do it because I don't think that's right. That's the world I want. I want a world where everyone's like that, and by default, the world would have no animal agriculture anymore. We'd have none of the, I'd want everybody to do that. I know that's a crazy high thing to go for.
Yeah.
It won't be achieved in my lifetime, but that's what I would like. That's why I do what I do. I want that world. What do you want?
I think, well, there's like two answers. There's one ideological answer, but I'm not going to give that because I don't think it's useful. So the practical answer is what I want is I want a world where people are like recognize like procreation as the I think harmful and risky business that it is
Okay.
for the person they're creating.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think there is a specific prescription that antinatalism gives. I think, like veganism, you can interpret it in different ways. So, with veganism, like you could want to achieve rights for animals, or you could want to, like you said, have people's behavior drive it, etc., etc. I think it's the same with antinatalism. Like, you can have some like whack jobs who want to take it too far on an ideological level, but for me, the way I see antinatalism going and the goal of it is simply to use the idea that um, like creating someone is a harm as a way to prevent more bad things happening in the world. Basically, I don't think I do think it would be a better world if like just no one was in it, which probably sounds like very extreme to people, and that's the ideological answer. But
Right.
that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. And so the practical answer, I think, is just getting people to realize that it is like a dangerous thing to play with, um, and hopefully people act accordingly. Yeah,
Right. Okay. So the practical answer I understand. The ideological answer you say is only purely ideological and could never actually come out and act into play come into play. But
yeah,
I mean, somebody could argue my ideological answer would never come into play, but I'm still going to aim for it. So is the ideology? What I would say is, would I be correct in saying your ideological answer that no one is in the world anymore? And I'm going to say what it is, even though you call this natalist bingo, human extinction, right? That's your ideological answer.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, but
Well,
you can't
no,
achieve that.
not human extinction. Just like no one being here. So
Fine,
it would
okay.
be
Extinction of all life, then that's your
yeah,
ideological
exactly.
answer.
That would be the yeah,
But isn't it fair to say that just like my ideological answer drives me, however, I settle for a practical world where that's not, I can't, I know that my answer is most likely never gonna happen, but I'm gonna
yeah,
aim for it anyway. Is that not the case for you? Are you not, is that not your
yeah.
driving
I guess
force?
yeah, I guess you could say so. Like if there was a way if there was a way that that end could be achieved in what I would consider an ethical way,
Right,
like no one gets hurt or anything like that. It's just simply by voluntary action. Um, then yeah, I would aim like directly for that.
right.
But
Mm,
I don't think there is a way to do that. And so
I think there
even
is.
with that, do you?
If antinatalism becomes more and more popular to the point where most people believe it, then eventually people just die out. The people, as in not all life, but humans is first, and then okay, well, you can once you're gone, there's nothing you can do about all the rest of the animals. But
Yeah,
yeah, you can
exactly.
take
Yeah, yeah.
care of the worst offenders.
Yeah, w I but the thing is, I don't see that practically happening. Like, that's never going to.
No, but
I
why
don't
not
think
have
that's
it
ever
as an
going
ideological driver though? Like the same as my ideological driver is that
to.
everybody listens to me and stops doing this to animals. Why is that
Yeah,
not your ideological driver?
yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
does it does this to
It's
you.
a driver, but it's not the goal anymore. If you get what I mean.
Fine. Okay. So you've got something driving you, and then you've got a practical goal. The same way I
Yeah.
have something driving me. Practical goal for me would be monstrous reductions in the animal agriculture industry because I don't think it's ever going to go away. But
Yeah.
practically, I would like it to be to the absolute minimum. Where ideologically, all of it would be over. So I think, okay, cool. So your ideological answer and your practical answer, these are based on both on a core argument that you have, the core ethical argument to not have children. So what is this core ethical framework that let's say you can go into detail if you want, but like I'm looking for the number one reason you give to not have a child, the number one reason that you want people to recognize it's harmful and risky and that it prevents harm. You want to stop these things from happening, or ideologically you want all life. What is the basis for all of that then, with having kids specifically, like how is this leading to these drivers and goals?
Yeah, so I would say there are four like main reasons, and I've written them out on a web page, like a
Okay.
website I run, which I'll link in the description. I'm just saying that for the benefit of people watching,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
um, so yeah, there are four main ones. So the first one is basically about a difference between how I actually think many people value like goods and bads in this way,
Okay.
but I think often they will reject it once they realize where it goes.
Right.
So like when one individual creates another, the individual they're creating will then be alive and experience like things that like they value and things that they want to avoid and they don't
Yep.
like good and bad things. So I think if someone was to create someone and know that that person was only going to experience the good things, I don't think they have an obligation to create that person. Like if they do create that person, then whoop de doo, like they're only going to experience good things. It doesn't like I don't really care. It's like whatever. But I don't think that there's anything compelling them to do that. I don't think there's a driving force, right? I
Right.
just think it's more of like a neutral thing. Whereas on the negative side, if they're going to create someone knowing that that individual is only going to experience the bad things, then I would say there is a driving force against creating them. Like, even though they don't exist now, to state their preference that
Yep.
they don't want those harms to be inflicted on them, you know that it's not going to be a good thing to create them.
So it's like when
Um,
people find out, just to be clear, like when a doctor, they do like these scans on kids and they find out the kid is like it is formed incorrectly, like is very deformed or has a debilitating mental disorder. They can say they most likely will have this. You know, they can check things these days, right? And they can give
exactly.
they can give the parent the option. I think I can't remember exactly. There's like genetic defects. They can now detect them in the
Yeah.
womb, right? So you can say like, this is. You make the decision. Do you want to bring someone into the world who so I know that's a like ethically complicated topic, but that I guess that's a practical version of
Yeah.
what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, that's like an everyday example sort of thing.
Yeah,
So it's like I think everyone recognizes that it is it's at best ethically like problematic to impose that harm on someone else when they literally didn't exist to like need anything. You just created them and now harm is being imposed on them. But if that same couple had a scan and found out that their kid was going to be literally like the most blissful kid ever or whatever, nothing bad was going to come from them.
right.
I don't think people would say, oh, yeah, well, those people have an obligation to create that child. They would just say, well, if they do, it's good that the kid has a happy life, but they don't have like a obligation to. So
No.
that's the first thing is those difference in obligations. Like, I don't think we have a reason compelling us to create someone for good stuff, but we do have something um, that's compelling us to not create them to avoid the bad stuff. And if you
Okay.
put a neutral and a negative together, it puts you in the negative direction, right?
Yeah.
So the second one is about risk. So even if you sort of remove the idea that existence itself is imposing a harm on someone,
Yeah.
even if you think it can be a good thing, like not everyone in the world has a good life. Let's say, um, I don't know, if you take all of the globe, let's say like 1% of people have, just like an awful life, and that can be from things like a genetic disorder that you don't detect, but you still create the child, or they have an accident, or they
Yep.
get some disease, or all of those sorts of things. Um, with risk, it's basically saying, given no one needed to create it, and you're not
Mhm.
harming the people who would have had decent lives by not creating them, they just
Mhm.
don't exist. Why play that game? Why roll the dice for that 1% when none of them needed to exist in the first place? Um, the third reason is like about life being a sort of imposition on someone. So when you create someone, they then have all of these things that they've got to maintain, do, to maintain good, mental health, physical health,
Yep.
good relationships, all of that sort of stuff, which once you exist you can enjoy doing. But before you exist, you wouldn't, that's not a reason to create someone. Oh, they'll enjoy creating good relationships with people. Like, well, they don't exist to want that. So, but once you create them, you've imposed that sort of, it's like a rent, it's like a cost of living, if you
Right.
get what I mean. It's
Yep.
like a rent you have to pay, putting in all this effort to do that. And I
Yep.
don't think it's up to one person to choose to impose that on someone else.
Right.
Because you're making a decision on someone else's behalf, not just for yourself. And the
Okay.
final one is consent, like, which sort of buttresses all of those other three. Is that those other three things wouldn't be an issue if someone was making the decision for themselves,
Yep.
but obviously you can't decide to create yourself, right? So
Yep.
all of those things happen without consent.
Yep.
So yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So that's the 4, that's the 4, and, I've listened to each one of them, and it doesn't really, I mean, I there's nothing I would pull up as any kind of, "Oh, this is, like, objectively wrong," or "This logic doesn't match up," or anything like that. I think, so my main, like, reaction to point 1, just say, no, there's nothing, no obligation to have kids, even if they would have a perfect life, but there is an you would definitely not wanna bring someone into the world who's only gonna have a bad life. So I get that. That makes sense. That's to consider things a bit more objectively, and to kind of look at things a bit more carefully. The risk factor, yeah, of course, there's always, you're rolling the dice. That I think any parent in the world should be well aware of that. That, don't go into having a baby thinking, oh, it's all going to be wonderful. Like, you need
Yeah.
to realize you're rolling the dice, and it's actually more likely a baby's going to be unhealthy and have problems than to be healthy. If you look at either during pregnancy or after pregnancy, the chances are your kid's going to have a more problematic life than a problem-free life, right? It's just we all have problems. We have luxury and bad problems and luxury problems, but we all have problems. So you're rolling the dice on what kind of problems a kid's going to have. Agreed. Um, Life is in position. I mean, that seems a little bit more kind of out there, a little bit ethereal, let's say, but
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, okay. I've not. I don't need to argue that. And then the consent thing again. Yeah, you could argue that there's no consent to be had pre-birth because there's no being to consent. And then when they come into existence, it's already done, so there's not possible for
Mm.
them to have. That's a complicated. Again, it's like spiritual, really. That I don't really,
Yeah.
that's too
Well,
spiritual for me.
I can like very quickly explain it in a different way, which I actually explained to Johnny when I spoke to him.
Right.
Which is that, sure, like when you're making the decision to create someone, there's no one there at that point in time
To
to
consent. Yeah.
consent, or for their consent to be violated.
Right.
The way that I think is it's maybe best put is that creating someone requires the violation of consent. Like, even though they don't exist, when you're
Sure.
making the decision, at the point of birth, that is when it happens. So you know that that's going to happen in the future, even though there's no one existing
Sure. Okay.
now.
Like I said, that is definitely like more of a. It gets into a little bit too much like wanky philosophy for me, to be totally honest with you.
Nah.
However, I don't disagree with it. It seems to make sense on the surface, but I'm sure somebody who was more into the philosophy stuff could start some kind of
Mm.
discussion on it. But for me, it's like, okay, whatever. Okay, I can move on from that. So there's not. I've not really got any. So I'll move on to the next point then. I wanted to
Yeah.
get these from you because I don't want to misrepresent you as we go forward. I want to make sure I understand and get this stuff down. I've heard it before. Obviously, I've seen your videos, but like this is we're doing this now, so I don't want to assume what I
Yeah.
know just from old stuff. So okay, do you think there's any justification to have a child?
Um, in any context we're talking about,
Practical context, yeah, like not
practical
some like
context.
crazy hypothetical that would never happen. Like real hypotheticals you could use, like something that could really happen.
Um, yeah, I think there are certain situations where I would not put moral blame on someone for having a kid. So I don't think this was the angle you were going down, but I'm just going to mention it just so it's
Right,
sort of there. Like if someone, you know, if someone becomes pregnant by, a partner, and then the partner is, manipulative or abusive in some way, then I,
right.
I would not put moral blame on the person. But I don't think that's the route you were going down. I think you were thinking
Oh,
about like rationalizations that people
well,
would
that
come
yeah,
up
okay,
with.
that's like okay, not necessarily like that somebody is in a position what is it called where someone's forced into something like, it begins with a C. Why do I sometimes these words go out of my mind.
Uh,
When someone is, like, at gunpoint and they have to do it and it's just not their fault.
oh,
Coerced,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
so coercion, obviously, I'm not asking you about coercion. I feel like that stuff is clear as day. I know you're not the kind of person that's gonna be like, "No, they're still scumbags." Like, that's not, your coercion, like, if someone's, yeah, that's horrible, but it happens. I'm
But
talking
a
about
freely given
freely given,
reason.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Um, so when it comes to justifying it as an act in and of itself, I would say no. But if we're zooming out and talking about on a society level, then I would say there will be circumstances. I don't think we're in those circumstances at the moment, but I
Mhm.
think we could be in circumstances very, very like realistically. This is not out there stuff, but I think we could be in circumstances where there would need to be like a some sort of level of procreation going on for sort of like um the benefits of it generally would outweigh the harms of it, if you get what I mean. So I'll,
Right.
I'll give an example. Like if if humans got to the point where our birth rates were, declining, and we were losing technological capacity and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and we lost our capacity to help others, and others were in a really bad situation. When I say others, I generally mean like wild animals, which I know we've had a discussion of, but like let's put to the side, unless you want to go into it, let's put to the side for the moment like the ethics of helping wild animals. But um yeah, if procreation, or the lack of it, gets to the point where it would hinder our ability to help others, and they're in a really shit situation,
Right.
then I would say some level of procreation in the human population would be justified, yeah. But I don't think we're in that situation at the moment. Like, I don't think any individual person would be able to say, yeah, I'm justified in procreating to further that cause, because our population is like so big. We have like
Yeah.
excess people.
Right. So what I'm getting here just before we go on then is that in your worldview, um, so having babies is wrong for the 4 points you brought out, which all are like something that you believe, but you're happy to, or not happy to, but you're willing to forgo those violations of, let's say, I suppose you would call them violations of a new person's rights, so long as it fits into what you believe, something, as long as it helps something else that you think is more important.
Let me give an example, and I'll try and maybe relate it to like veganism. So, like, I think the current situation with antinatalism at the moment is that, like, yeah, human procreation like sucks. Like, I think it's a bad, but it's not the baddest bad, and there are other things that we should prioritize,
Mhm.
right? So if I was going to relate that to veganism, I would say circuses are bad that use
Mhm.
animals.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like that they do that, but there are worse things happening that we should pay attention to and spend our time on. I think that's the
But there's a
current
big difference,
situation.
though. There's a huge difference because I'm not saying that circuses are justified. You're saying that having kids is justified because there are more important things.
No, no, so I'm saying that that's the situation at the moment, right?
Mm.
And but now I'm getting like to the what could be the situation in the future.
Yeah.
So if there's a situation in the future where and if I relate it to veganism, like some level of animal use was needed to prevent an even greater harm that was just like massive.
Mm.
Um, then I would say like I hate that animal use, and I don't think the act of animal use is a good thing.
Right.
But given if like we're given options, right? We don't live in this abstract world. Like we're given options. Either we take this action that we otherwise think is wrong,
Mm.
um, or we don't, right? But if we don't take it, like so much harm is going to come from that. Then I would say, okay, practically speaking, maybe we have to accept some level of bad things
Right.
happening in the world, so that even greater harms don't come around. Which I,
It's
I
yeah.
think is a principle that like most people act on. Do you get what I mean?
Mm. It's a weird. I see why the comparisons to veganism I had, but I also find them very strange because it's obviously they can be compared, but it does feel a bit odd when it's we're talking about a human's choice to whether or not to procreate, but you don't see it as that. You don't see two people procreating as a choice between two people. You see it as a violation of a third person.
Mm,
So you have basically what you've done is taken humans having babies, and you've removed all of the romance around it, I suppose, and the all of the arguments that most people would use, and you've just gone for the kind of made it kind of very very cold, logical, and very like a methodical thing. Like you've taken all yeah you've taken that's what I'd say it again. You've taken the romance out of it, and then we're left with
mm,
just this is a harmful act, and people should consider. So that's why I guess that's why you make the comparison. For me, it's a little bit trickier because I'm still
I
in the
get what you
mode.
mean.
Yeah, I'm still in the mode of like well, there is something clearly, you don't agree, but there is something clearly, I don't know. I'm not into the spiritual side of things, so I would say special, I suppose. Maybe it's just people's hormones, the acting. Maybe it's just our intrinsic kind of instincts kicking into play
Yeah.
with having families and comparing that with some amount of like real kind of core thing like it's one human putting part of them into another human to create another human. There's something quite special about that versus raising an animal for the sole purpose of using and killing them. It's a weird comparison, but I understand why you do it. I'm just saying it does feel a bit strange, that's all.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, but
I don't
also
disagree with your comparison, by the way,
yeah,
just
yeah.
to be clear. I'm just pointing out that why, even though it kind of made sense, I'm still sat here thinking there's something bothering me about
No,
this.
no, I get it, I get it, I get it. And like, if it's easier for anyone watching, like the comparison with veganism stuff, like
Mm,
you can use, just place into the example I put like a form of animal exploitation that doesn't involve killing. It could be,
sure.
a more
Yeah.
benign one or whatever.
Okay.
Remove some of the emotion from it. But I do get where you're coming from with the whole special stuff because, like I said, like for 20 years of my life, like sure I was a kid for most of those 20 years, but like I did have these strong feelings as well. So
Mm,
I get where people are coming from and I can remember what it's like to view it in that special way. I just think the romance and the viewing it as this sort of like, yeah, in the romantic way,
mhm.
it it gets in the way. That sort of emotional compartment gets in the
Yeah.
way of thinking about it in a more logical, moral way.
Of course it does,
And
yeah. As
yeah, and
people,
I'm
that's
not.
what we do.
Yeah, I know
It's like
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
everything we do. So it feels like and on this I don't mean okay, this is another comparison, but this doesn't mean to offend you, but it's something
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would I would maybe consider
I'm
as we
offended.
as we move forward, is, there are people out there who I've referred to them as extreme people, and I think you
Yeah.
might even fall into this category a little bit with this topic. So, like, for example, in the vegan world, we can talk about there are extreme people, and what they tend to do is they go very, very, very hard one way, and then when they switch, they go hard the other way. And for that, a good example of this would be these idiot vegans. I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm just using it as a comparison. Who they weren't ever vegan, obviously, or maybe they were at one point, but whatever. Hold the other debate. They go vegan, and then it's the focus on health as well, and then they switch to raw, and then they switch to fasting, and then they drink pee, and then they go
Yeah.
crazy, that and then they get sick, and then they start to look at other stuff. Then they go complete polar opposite to the opposite direction: carnivore, all meat, vegans, all shit, blah blah blah. Do you I'm asking you this, I'm not saying you're
Yeah,
like
I get it.
anything
Am I one of
remotely
those
like
people?
that, but do you not think that's kind of what you did? You were hardcore. Oh my god, I want 3 kids. You had planned your life out all around kids,
Mm.
and that was extreme that way. And then you found some stuff that was like the opposite, and now you've gone the polar opposite end. Like you could not be more the other side of what you used to be.
Well, first of all, I only drank my own pee once, so thanks for bringing that up.
I only look at the sun occasionally because you're directly at it.
Um, no, I get what you mean. Like, I think from the outside, it can definitely like come across like that,
Mm.
and yeah, I mean, maybe
By the
I
way, I
would
just want to
say,
clarify, this is not
yeah,
by any means, I don't mean to this to be like, oh, this is why you're wrong. This is
no,
like
no,
an
I get it.
additional question of
Just a
like, I'm
matter
just
of fact thing.
curious. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
curious. Like that this is nothing to do with, it's just popped into my head. Yeah. I don't want
yeah,
anybody
yeah, yeah.
watching
Because
this to think I'm trying to like manipulate this or something. Like I'm not. I'm
no,
genuinely
no,
just
no.
asking because I'm curious.
No, because it can happen with vegans as well, right? Like you can have like big meat eaters who become vegan and then they're like, they're hardcore into animal rights and stuff. So
It happens that way too. I should have used that
yeah.
example, not the other one. Yeah.
But yeah,
Uh, but I'm talking
I get
like, yeah, okay. You're right. I have kind of painted you out to be negative in that example. But
no,
I
no,
guess,
but like
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
get it,
answer.
and I think people from all of your sort of like um conciliatory whatever's like people will get it. Um Yeah, I can see how it comes across like that. I think in reality, it was a bit of a smoother transition than
Okay.
people maybe perceive because I did go from like extreme on the one end, like, just really fixating on having kids, um, to then, yeah, being completely against it. But I think I've kind of mellowed and nuanced a bit since then by talking about the different priorities and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
there was a period in between where I was intellectually convinced but not emotionally there,
Yeah,
with
like you
like I said
mentioned. Yeah.
before. So that period wasn't like a massive amount. It was maybe only like 6 months or something like that. But
Mhm.
it wasn't like overnight complete flip.
Okay.
Whereas actually with veganism, I was a big meter and then I complete flip like 1 second to the next.
Mhm.
Um, and then within about a day, I was like very like
Okay.
into animal rights, veganism stuff. So I don't know, maybe it's my personality
Mm.
um, that when it comes to at least, and I've done some thinking about this about myself, and I'm trying to like understand how I behave a bit more. But I
Mhm.
think at least when it comes to ethics, like once I'm convinced something is like harmful or wrong,
Yep.
I will just take that position and then be quite principled on it.
Yeah, that's smart, and I think that's kind of maybe what I represented with that example was not the right example, because obviously people make extreme moves to a good thing. Also, my concern is when it's when it's polar opposites of the spectrum, it doesn't
Yeah.
tend to last very long. That's my concern with when that's kind of why I was bringing it up. I was like putting it out there that maybe this. I again don't mean to offend you, but had you considered at all that this could be um
Like a
quite
phase.
an extreme phase of yours, yeah, which is really rude actually, now I think about it. But I was just curious to ask. I mean, if I'd like somebody to ask me this if they, about veganism, then I could explain just like you have. No, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
believe it is, right? However, I should have known better than to ask that. So that's on
No,
me.
I mean,
Because it's a shit
I don't
question, man.
think.
I know you well enough to know it's most likely not that, and that it's most likely that you're convinced by the ethics than you're being sensible. So stupid question.
Yeah, but no, I don't think it's a stupid question. Like, I didn't take offense or anything.
Okay,
Like, I don't
cool.
like. I think you know well enough now that I can't
Yeah, you
remember
don't
the
really
last
get
time I was
offended.
offended.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I was gonna say something else then, but I think that would offend some people. We'll talk to you off screen about that point. I have something to ask you, but can't do it. Everyone's gonna be wondering what it is now. Off air, I'll ask you.
okay, cool.
All right, cool. So that's a good answer, and yeah, I'm still with you. So we've okay. So now we've defined a few cool things, and I'm happy that we did all this because now I know very much where you stand. And now I know that there is a possibility that that you could agree with me that there is some justification to have a child, that you already just did, that you gave your a world where you could justify it. I think I might have a world where I can justify it too. So that's where I want to get into now. And again, just want to remind everybody and you, I have no skin in the game. I don't plan to have a kid.
Yeah.
It's something Annie and I have discussed, and I think I have pretty much since knowing Annie, I've always been on the side of most likely not good. I don't really want to do it, and not because of the reasons you say, but I don't want to be personal reasons. I don't feel like being tied down. I like to move around and stuff. I'm not at that moment where I feel like, okay, I want to stay here, like right here, and I want to
Yeah.
be in the house always, and never do anything spontaneous anymore for the next 18 years. I'm not. I don't feel like that's the place where I'm at yet. Right. That's the reason I've said not really. Although your stuff is starting to play in a little bit, like we've had these discussions. But anyway, just to reiterate that point. So, okay, some questions for you. Do you agree with me when I say that antinatalism is a product of intellectuals, authors, people who are smart enough to have realized this stuff, most likely educated people, and do you agree with me that that's where it came from, the idea, right? Or is that
N
contested? Can you contest that?
when you say came from, do you mean like originally, or do you mean
Made popular
like
by.
yeah, I would say it was probably made it was it's become more known because of the work of like academics and stuff, but
Yeah,
I would say no one
philosophers.
knows. Yeah, philosophers and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Okay.
yeah, do you want
So
me to elaborate a bit or
no,
just
no, I
leave it
mean
at
just
that?
that's it. That's it. That
Okay.
is. So
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
it so it's fair to say, and I think we all know, you include, everyone knows this, that your average Joe doesn't read up on philosophy, right? Or anything like that. The average person isn't into that stuff. They might have the
Mm,
lessons from their parents or whatever, but the average person is not reading up this kind of stuff. This is a something that intellectuals do, academics do, like uni students in specific, you know, studying different specific courses. If they
yeah.
were studying, I don't know, hairdressing, probably not. But if they're into, like, the sciences, even the sociology stuff, psychology maybe as well. What else would this kind of journalism maybe, like, because they might want to do pieces on it and stuff like. So there's a specific type of people, the specific type of the world that is most likely going to be exposed to these ideas. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah, I would say more likely. I wouldn't say solely because
Not
I
solely. No,
think
no, 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 not
yeah, yeah.
solely, but more likely. The
Yeah, I'd say
majority.
more likely. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I
Yeah.
I
Go on.
I would probably agree majority, but I don't know because there are a lot of people
We're
in
guessing
like
here. It's
yeah,
guesstimating.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's
it's
a
common
guesstimate.
sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we can, like, we don't have the data, right? And I don't know if you have the data. I don't have the data. That would be a weird data point when someone did a study of how many people and what kind of people are into it. What I guess someone's done it somewhere, maybe, but I
I
doubt
don't think
it's.
they have. Like, it's very under researched.
Absolutely, and I doubt. And if they did do it, it'd probably be pretty low quality anyway. But it'd be better than nothing, obviously. But
Mm,
but anyway, we don't have it, so we just have to use kind of like common sense, and because we can use our both of our experiences. I know you learned about this from talking to people, like you said, and reading books on
yeah.
it. So already, like, those people got it from books. Let's be honest. Like, they definitely got it from like academia and people in that world. I got it from you. You got it from books. You recommended books to me. So okay, this is the type of people that are going to be. Also, additionally, the type of people that are most likely going to be interested in this, like when you say, hello, would you like to talk about this? They're going to be interested in doing good in the world. They're not going to be interested
Mm,
in doing bad in the world, because if
yeah.
they are, they're going to say, fuck you and your book. I'm not going to read it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So empathetic people. So we agree that it's most likely, like, guessing here, educated or interested in education, empathetic people that are picking this up and listening to you and
Mm,
listening to people like you. Cool. That's good. We established that. So, next question. Do you agree that the formative years of a child are the most important when you consider who they're going to become? I mean, when I say this, is that a traumatic childhood will create a traumatized
mm.
person. A good childhood could create a good person, but is more likely to create a good person if they have
Yeah, yeah.
parents who know what they're doing, right? That's just science, right? We know that
Yeah.
psychology. Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, the only bit of nuance I would add is, like, obviously there are certain events that can happen later in life that
Completely.
can change someone's life, but
Completely.
by and large, yeah, it's the sort of early years of people's lives that fundamentally decide who they are.
Right.
Like, I
Yeah.
guess that's my understanding. Like, I'm not a scientist, but yeah.
It is, yeah. I mean, from what I studied, I mean, it was a long time ago, but from what I studied, this was the case. Yeah, like it's far more likely that someone's going to turn out to be um, secure. Let's say, I don't know what the word you would use is, not normal, but just healthy, I suppose, mentally
Yeah.
and with good ways of dealing with stuff. And okay, and then, so do you agree with me when I say that not always, but probably most of the time, empathetic, kind people are empathetic and kind through the life lessons that they got as children? Like, for example, me being a good example of it, like I didn't have the perfect upbringing. I had a quite a broken family. My dad wasn't there for my upbringing, so single parent, living in a very horrible, drug infested small town, like literally drug dealers everywhere. Um, Heroin needles coming up in the drains because the people were flushing them down the toilets. When I was younger, I didn't understand it was a needle. I was running around with one, using it as a water gun. I thought
Mm,
I was shooting people with it. So that's my upbringing, right? So you'd expect
mm,
I would be a bit fucked up coming from that, but I wasn't, because fortunately, my mum, for all the other stuff, she was able to give us some good morals and good ethics, especially with animals, but also with women, teaching me how I should and shouldn't act with women, how I should and shouldn't act with other people, how I should care for people when they're weak and not bully them, how I should. She taught me all this stuff, and
mm.
fortunately, I had some problems because my dad wasn't around. But fortunately, those went away because that was just part of that was a shitty moment in my life. I had some bad times, but I grew out of it because of the core lessons she gave me. So that's an anecdote, but I mean, I think, do you agree with me that somebody who gets those life lessons is more likely to become someone empathetic and kind versus someone who doesn't get those lessons at that important age, like younger?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Probably. I mean, we can
Yeah.
assume it probably, like that, most likely, or at least if you compare one group of people who get good morals and good ethics from age 3 up versus the other
Yeah.
ones that don't, the one group that gets it's probably going to
Yeah,
be the
they're gonna be
ones
better.
who be
Yeah.
nice people and empathetic people who care about others. And this brings me to my main issue, that if so you've agreed that your ideology is not practical, it will not happen, and you understand that people are going to keep having babies, regardless of what you tell them. So with most antinatalists that fall into this category of educated people who are empathetic and want to help the world, ethical people. This is antinatalists, most of them. Like we could easily assume, because why else would they get into this? I mean, maybe some of them want to like control the population. Maybe some of them are part of agenda, or whatever, the UN's agenda or whatever. But most people probably aren't. Right? That's a conspiracy theory. But these people don't have kids, and they don't become that group that I've just said, right? So then we're left with people that um, don't have kids, right? So we're left with people that have kids, sorry, but then they're less likely to be giving them these lessons because these are the remainders. Like if antinatalism does become very, very popular and more and spreads, it
Mm.
spreads amongst the good, kind-hearted, ethical people, not these people that don't care about that stuff. And then those people who don't care keep having kids and teach their kids the lessons that the antinatalists are not able to teach them until later in life. So they grow up with their formative years with either no ethics or potentially selfish ethics, creating more and more people like that. And if people are wondering like, oh, but you don't have any evidence of this, we already live in this world. We already are
Mm.
in this world where the majority of people who are born into families where people couldn't give a shit about animals. They couldn't give a shit about this kind of good philosophies on life. And they most people who are born into the world are born into, let's be honest, selfish families who don't care about any of this stuff. They just care about themselves. And I'm not saying that as a shade on them. This is just the reality.
It's just a matter of fact. Yeah.
People just care about themselves more than others, and there are only so many people like me and you who do care, and then we're not having kids. So my
Mm.
concern is that antinatalism actually is going to make that worse and worse as more and more ethical people become antinatalist, and more people are becoming ethical every day. We're going to see more and more vegans, right? And then in your world, you want them all to become antinatalist. And then we end up with this chasm growing more and more and more to the point where we're just going to end up with a world controlled and dominated by people who are have been raised in ways that are not ethical, and these people that could have, done something about that didn't, because they were convinced to be antinatalists. So I feel like the ideology. I've given you a lot here. I'm going to let you answer in one. I'll just
Yeah.
close off here. I feel like the ideology um, could potentially kill itself off by simply only remaining in the world where ethical people are, and eventually there'll be no one else left to teach it because they'll die out because no one's
Mm.
going to be left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah, I'm done for now.
you
Yeah,
got
I
everything?
realize I've
Yeah, yeah.
hammered you with a lot, but that's kind of
No, no, no,
the
it's
end of
all
that
good.
point. Yeah.
I'll try and remember. So the first thing I want to say is just going back to near the start. I think so. I said that I agree that antinatalists are generally the more they tend to have been exposed more to academia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The only sort of caveat I would add to that is the people that I've interacted with. There are actually a lot of antinatalists who live in countries that are, I don't know what the correct way to put it is, but like not as
Developing,
developed.
developing
Yeah,
countries.
developing countries. Um, in fact, I would say the majority of antinatalists are in those countries,
Yeah.
and I don't know the character of them, but I would from the exposure that I have had to them, not everyone is like fully exposed to academia and stuff like that.
Well, but I mean,
Um,
sorry, can I
but
just chime in? But that
yeah,
they
yeah.
are smart enough to understand a complicated concept like this and to engage with you on something that
Not
requires you to have a
no,
certain level of understanding.
not necessarily because not all antinatalists have the sort of command of the philosophical arguments that I've just put forward at the start of the video. Like a lot of people come to antinatalism, and
Mhm.
actually, I would probably say it's the majority of antinatalists I've interacted with come at it from an emotional point of view. They just
Okay.
see suffering around them, and they don't want to put someone in a world where there's a lot of suffering, which is not. That's not like a complicated argument. That's just like an emotional sort of assessment of the world, if you get what I mean.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
a lot of them do come from that point of view. They don't have the sort of they're not like reasoned into it. But I just wanted to like add that caveat.
So,
We can put that to the side.
could I just I
Yeah.
wanted to chime in on that. And so they wouldn't be considered antinatalists then. These are just people that are, because of the situation they're in, and they're in a country where there's a lot of suffering. They're trying to tell people, look, like we're not in a good position. Don't have kids. They're not. They wouldn't technically be antinatalists. They are just trying to convince people that don't, for now at least. But they wouldn't be against somebody in a more affluent place having kids. Otherwise, if they are against that, then they're an antinatalist, and they understand all the morals you just said.
Yeah, yeah, but they get to that afterwards. I was talking about how they get introduced to it. Like they come to it
Right.
from an emotional point of view, but then once they've engaged with other antinatalists,
Yeah.
then they get exposed to the ideas, if you get what I mean. But the
Okay.
the the door that they
Yeah.
enter through is
Yeah.
an emotional assessment.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah. So the other things that I wanted to say. So okay, so basically, let me basically like summarize what you said so that I'm not answering
Steel
the
man
wrong
me.
thing. Yeah. So basically, I think what you're saying is that yeah, as Kathy Newman said, what you're saying is um so antinatalism as an idea is seen as a good thing to spread by antinatalists, but you're worried that, or maybe you're not worried, but
Hmm.
you would be worried if you came from their perspective because the idea they're trying to spread generally gets adopted by people who are more empathetic
Mhm.
and more educated, um, and that will cause those people to not have kids,
Mhm.
and this will actually tend to over the long term have a negative impact on
Mhm.
doing good in the world
Mhm.
because it will hinder the ability of the people who generally do good to do that good. Is that but that's basically
I guess more or less. I would add that it's because it's more likely that good people will raise good people. They will
yeah,
from
that's what I mean by like
having
their
raised.
ability to do good in the world, yeah.
Right. And then, yeah, and then that's the kind of a driving force, I think, of a lot of parents who are good people, is to try to make the world better with more good people. And if they stop
Yeah.
doing that, if all the good people stop, then we're left with good people who exist trying to educate the ones who've already had bad lessons in their formative years, and we know how difficult it is to undo those lessons. We're both trying to
Mm,
get people to go vegan, and that's incredibly difficult. And we're losing. It's a losing battle right now. Let's be honest. Like, it's got successes, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's still very much an uphill battle. It's
yeah.
incredibly slow. You know.
Yeah, so my mind has somewhat like changed. So I'm probably going to give a slight because just for like full transparency, when David and I were hiking, we had like this exact conversation on this exact topic.
It was definitely a
Uh,
little bit like it wasn't formed on my side though.
yeah,
Like when I threw it at you the first time, it popped in my head, and I was like, "Oh, what about that?" And then I've thought about it. I thought, Is it? Does it make sense?" And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, "Okay, I think there's something here we need to actually sit down and
yeah.
talk about." You know?
So I think my answer is going to be different now because my opinion has slightly changed after I had the conversation with John. Um, so when I've referenced it before in this conversation. When I
Yeah,
was talking to John, he was explaining to me. So before I started talking to John about what we were talking about, which I'll get to, I was very much sort of focused on um, trying to convince um, individual people to not have kids, basically.
right.
A bit like it's like trying to convince individual people to be vegan. I'm not comparing veganism and antinatalism. I just mean like practically, I was trying to do individual behavior change,
Right,
right? And then I was speaking to John, and we were talking about, you know, if we see antinatalism as being an idea that can lead to good in the world, what is the best way of using that idea to do good in the world?
right.
And he convinced me that actually trying to convince individual people to become antinatalist is not necessarily the way to do that.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons is the reason that you just gave, right?
Okay.
That um, the people who will adopt it will generally be actually not so basically it's a matter. The reason that don't want to focus on human procreation going forward in like how I like spread antinatalism is because it's basically like priorities. And like I said before, I think there are priorities that are more pressing than human procreation, like what's happening to animals, that what humans are doing to them, but also what's happening in the wild. And
Wait, so
also
you
there are
okay, I'm lost here. Like, how does is antinatalism inclusive of other animals? Is that what you're trying to say?
it's see because it basically the reason that antinatalists are against like humans creating other humans is because they see that as creating another person as a harm. So there's no moral difference between humans and animals. So
I
obviously
get
they're
that.
harmed by being created as well. The difference is that they're not agents in choosing to do that. They just like, as far as we can tell, they basically just do it kind of like by instinct or
So
whatever. They
so
can't
But
rationalize
then
it.
it seems honestly, it almost seems like being an antinatalist, if it doesn't focus on humans, it's kind of redundant because veganism includes that. You can just be a vegan. Vegans don't agree with breeding animals for any purpose. And some vegans are getting into the discussion about wild animals too, but I don't see how antinatalism needs to come into this discussion. You can just be a vegan who focuses on those topics.
Yeah, because you were just saying that like so with
If
like
I'm
yeah,
trying, sorry, what I'm
everyone.
trying to say is if it's not about humans, then it's not about it's redundant. Is what I'm trying to
No,
say.
it's about. I don't see why it's redundant. It's about it's not about humans. The reason people focus on humans is because it's a lot of people are anthropocentric, but it's
It's
about creating someone
but
who's
it's
conscious.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting that because like it doesn't make sense then. If okay, if it wasn't about if it wasn't about humans, it was about all animals, then every antinatalist would be vegan, but they're not. And so I
Yeah,
don't
it's because
really.
but I think those people are idiots. Like they're being morally inconsistent.
But okay, it's a weird. It's I do see it. I'm sorry that I do see it as a redundant ideology then because it's part of veganism. Like that's if it quote that the bit that's different from veganism is the human aspect.
No,
Vegans
because
by being a vegan, you don't say I'm against human procreation, but by being an antinatalist and a vegan, you do say you're against human procreation. That's the breaker. That's the
no,
point
but
that makes it
also
different.
like vegans, a lot of vegans like don't see any issue with like like nature, like that. In fact, they
That's
like
true.
nature. They
I
want
know,
to
but
promote rewilding and stuff like
I
that,
know,
right?
but that can be debatable though. That can be that's not antinatalism. That's just vegans who believe this is worth debating, and vegans who
Mm.
don't. That's a debate within veganism. I don't.
But that is antinatalism because antinatalists see it as a bad thing that wild animals are creating each other,
I
just like it's
understand.
a bad thing.
I get that, dude. I get what you're saying, but
But I don't understand why it's redundant.
because that is an element of something in veganism. That's not what you believe about animals and the harm to with wild animals. Like this is something that vegans within the vegan circles will debate are debating, and it will become, or like there are, like, for example, there are elements of veganism that vegans don't agree on, that some would claim are harm, but the antinatalist movement is not a vegan movement. It's at least, and then maybe you're
But
trying to make it that.
you're just labeling it vegan because vegans are having the debate. Like I could label it antinatalist because antinatalists are having the debate.
So,
Like,
but
it doesn't matter what we label it, it's
yeah,
the
I
issue that
understand.
matters. Like, we can remove the vegan and antinatalist label, like, that we can
I
just
do.
talk about the issue, if you get what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah, sure. I just feel like it's if you're saying that the humans is not the difference between being a vegan and being an antinatalist is absolutely the human element. That's what I'm trying to say. That is the core difference, that makes somebody either a vegan, because vegans don't pay any attention to human procreation. It's not part of being a vegan. But if they're a vegan and an antinatalist, then they absolutely do pay attention to human procreation. That's what I'm trying to say. Like if you're
Yeah, but
saying
they
it's all
could
the
also
same, then it's redundant.
well, no, because I think, like, vegans, like, veganism doesn't necessarily critique the creation of life, right? It more
Absolutely
deal
does. 100%
No,
does.
okay, but the yeah,
Not
but
humans though.
as
No.
far as it's a human exploitation of animals, like, vegans don't necessarily like, if we lived in a world where there were sanctuaries and we were just looking after animals, like, I don't think, would it be part of veganism that we should prevent those animals from breeding, or should we just let them do their thing?
No, it would be
Like, a
part.
lot
It
of
would.
vegans would say leave them.
No, but no, but they're stupid. It's practical. Like, why would you bring animals to a it's literally practical. Why would you bring animals to a sanctuary that has limited space and allow them to breed? Like, you can't think of that. There are so many other animals that you cannot rescue now from farms because you let the animals you have on the farm breed on the sanctuary breed. That makes no sense. That's illogical. Regardless of what
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
believe about natalism, that's illogical, right?
Yeah, 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 but I'm saying remove the practicality, like, veganism itself is not removing human exploitation. It doesn't make a critique of creating life itself, right? Whereas antinatalism does.
Yeah. So wait. So you but that's again that is something that vegans disagree on. Vegans who are not antinatalists disagree on that. They have no interest in antinatalism, or potentially have no interest. They don't mention it. They can argue
Mm.
this point without mentioning antinatalism. They can say, "I believe that it does include this." That's what I'm trying to say
Yeah, but
here.
I would say if they would then be making like a pro-antinatalist point. Whether they
Okay.
label it as antinatalist or not, I would say they're making a pro-antinatalist point.
So the point you're trying to get at here, you're trying to say is, I asked you if
Yeah,
I'm let me steal menu, like, and then we can keep
okay.
going just to make sure I get on back on track. So I asked you about this point of, okay, the good people having the babies, and is this a point where we can justify having the babies? You said that you no longer make what humans do or don't do in terms of procreation. That's no longer a core focus for you anyway. Now the core focus is actually animals, specifically wild animals. That's where we got to, basically, right? Intervened.
Yeah, yeah, so I was basically talking to John, and he convinced me that human, procreation is not the core issue that we should be focusing on,
Right.
because and there could actually be drawbacks on focusing on it in the wider scheme of things. So it's like what I said about circuses. Like, I view human procreation as bad, like I view circuses that use animals as bad,
Mhm.
but it's not the biggest issue out there. So I'm not going to focus on it at the moment. I think there are bigger things to focus on.
Right.
So it's basically like that. And the reason, when I was discussing with him,
Yep.
the reason that we sort of came to that we shouldn't be focusing on humans is there are three things. One, like, if the issue is like conscious life in general and not just human life, then humans make up a tiny proportion of conscious beings, right? That we can help.
Right.
Second of all, out of all conscious beings alive today, humans are like relatively very well off. Like on average, we have really good lives compared to most other beings that are alive, right?
Yep.
And third of all, humans are the only species that have a capacity to help others.
Right.
Now, obviously, in the past, we haven't really been doing that. We've been kind of cunts, but there are more and more people waking up to the fact that we can actually use our capacity
Yep.
to do good rather than be a dick to others, right?
Yep.
So those are three reasons why actually, if antinatalists went full steam ahead and just tried to, convince other people to not have kids as much as possible,
Yep.
that would actually maybe be a harm in the long run.
Yep.
Um, Obviously, the good thing about it would be that there would be less people being created, but in the grand scheme of things, it would actually be a harm because it would hinder our capacity to do good, right, at
Yep.
this stage. So
And that's the situation we're in right now. Like you
yeah,
said, you were
which is
talking.
why I'm saying my
Yeah.
answer has kinda changed because
Yeah.
I'm kinda shifting lanes.
Okay.
When we talked before, I was much more focused on, "Oh, human procreation is bad, human procreation is bad."
Yeah.
And now I'm like, "Yeah, it's bad, but I think there are bigger priorities that we need to address before we get to that."
Right. And well, and even if those other priorities are dealt with, we still run the risk of those things coming back if the good people stop procreating.
True. Yeah, yeah, true. I mean, but I think when we get to that point, that's literally gonna be, like, hundreds of thousands of years away. Like, this is this
I
is
know, I know.
not a thing that we need to discuss now.
Yeah, I know, I know. Yeah. So yeah. So we actually, I guess I agree with the 3 points you made. Because
Mm.
clearly there is more animal suffering.
Uh,
Whether we're considering, even if we're just considering farmed animals, there's
yeah.
it's an insane amount more than
Yeah, it's
human
way more,
suffering.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So go on,
Yeah,
you had a
because
point.
there are more farmed animals and their lives,
Yep.
each individual life is
Yep.
way worse than human lives.
Mm,
So the only extra point I would add on
sure.
top, which I think is maybe, we would, differ a bit here,
Okay.
is so, in terms of what I've just said about priorities and where we should focus our effort and not focusing on human procreation,
Yep.
I think that is true,
Mm,
but I don't think that then gives like any individual human carte blanche to be, oh, okay, well, it's fine for me to procreate then.
mhm.
So let's say, um, I don't want to use you as an example, but
You can if you want.
I'll use me. I'll use me.
Yep.
Like, imagine I haven't had a vasectomy, right? And I could
Yep.
still have a biological kid.
Yep.
So, and I've just said everything I would say. Now, someone may think then, oh, okay, well, since you've said that,
Mm,
does that mean then you are then justified in having a kid because it's not the biggest priority?
mm.
Well, I would say no. Like, I still recognize that the action itself is wrong and doing harm to the kid I'm going to create. And so I'm not going to do that, especially since, like you said, the people who think about these things actually want to do good in the world,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so if you're someone who wants to do good in the world and has come across the idea of antinatalism and recognizing that actually preventing other beings from being created in the first place is the best way of preventing suffering, you can do that much more effectively than having a kid and having to get up at 3 a.m. in the morning and wiping some small person's ass. Do you get what I mean? Like,
Mm.
you can put, like you're doing right now with your YouTube channel. Like, if you had a kid right now, it would destroy your capacity to do good in the world for maybe
Right.
15 years or something like that. Do you get what I
Alright.
mean?
Yeah,
So
but
it
I have an
yeah,
answer
so
if you don't. Alright, go ahead, man, sorry.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't know if I
No,
was
so I
cutting.
was just no, I was just gonna say, so that's the only bit of nuance I would add
Okay.
now. Like, I think human procreation, combating that is not the main issue, but even though it's not the main issue, it doesn't mean that humans can then just not think about their own procreation uncritically. Like, they
Yeah,
still
yeah.
need to critically analyze it, yeah.
So of course, and I know this is part of antinatalism when and people I know you guys get this a lot and people say stuff like, "Oh, my kid could fucking cure cancer," and it's
Yeah.
dumb. It's a part of a it's a little bit like I don't know what the word is. Like you
It's
just think.
coping,
Sorry?
like self-aggrandizement,
Yeah,
coping, stuff
basically,
like
yeah, 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 and that's a problem. But there is a real what we've agreed on here. There's that actually is a real application of this. What that is a reasonable thing to say. So you
yeah.
mentioned there that you still shouldn't procreate without really considering, and that's true. And as somebody like you or I or anyone who is thinking about this in a big way, if you have a kid, then all your time's going to go to this and et cetera, et cetera. Um, Now, the thing is, there's only so much you can do while you're alive, And when you're gone, and it's a short life. It's a very short life. Let's be honest. I mean, we
Yeah.
think we feel like it's long. It's not long. There's not much you can do in
No,
this
no.
life.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Right. So we have that. Right. We had that situation. Now, if anyone were to roll the dice, anyone in the world, right? The odds are in the favor of the people like you and I to have a good result. Now, like compare that to somebody. I mean, I know it is a roll of a dice. I'm not saying
Mm,
so. For example, one person who's not like you or doesn't have this kind of concept, very selfish, and that's okay. By the way, I'm not saying it's like a negative thing to be selfish. I'm just pointing out a fact that most people don't think about what we're talking about,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So this person, they roll the dice, right? Let's imagine they roll 5 dice. They have 5 die, right? They roll them on it, and they've all got random stuff on them, right? Blah, blah, blah. There's many different options that it could be, and only let's say two of the five are good. When we roll the dice, or two of the five have good attributes or whatever, when we roll the dice, it could potentially be, three of the five have good attributes. There's more of it, slightly more of a chance, is what I'm trying to say, of someone like you or I, or
yeah,
anyone out there who focuses on doing good in the world. There's a slightly higher chance that they have a kid who does good in the world versus somebody who just completely randomly rolls the dice, raises a kid in a way that's very selfish, and then maybe they will become good. So although I get what you're saying, I think so. Once we acknowledge, I think, do you agree on that with me before I move on to the next point? That's a fair representation of rolling dice. Like, it's of course it's always a roll, but the dice are loaded a bit better if you're already a good person, is what I'm trying to say.
uh, yes, there's a reply I wanna make, but
Okay.
you can finish so I don't throw you off.
So I guess, yeah, just do you don't agree with that first? Because it matters if you agree or not.
Yeah, yeah, no, I do agree with that, but even agreeing with it, I have something to say, but I wanna
All
say it
right.
after you finish, yeah.
So if we acknowledge that, and we're like, okay, then we're next looking at our impact on the world. Okay, you're right. You're right. Having a kid takes away a lot of your time to do this stuff, but
And money.
and money. But then you'll die, and then you'll have no impact on the
Mm,
world if you didn't have a kid. But if you did have a kid, then you have passed on, and this is, I know this is a typical natalist thing, but in this case, I think it's good. I think it's a good point in this
yeah,
case, not in other cases. In this case specifically, that you've tried your best to pass on these lessons to somebody who is going to continue fighting and doing what you couldn't do until they have a kid, and then they carry on doing it, and then the same thing, and then they have a kid, and then they have a kid, and you would hope you're rolling the dice, like I said, but once you're dead, you're dead. Like, your impact ends there. So I
yeah.
feel like this is something, it could be, it's a
Yeah.
consideration for somebody like
I
you.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not saying this in a negative way towards, you, I'm just saying it in
Yep.
a matter of fact way. Like, I think what you've said there is true, but I think it's leaving out a large part of what is also true. Like, I
Mhm.
think it's a bit, like, narrow in its assessment, right?
Yeah.
Because the first thing I want to say is, even though it's true that someone who's more empathetic and highly educated, their kid is more likely to turn out better than a kid who's born to parents who aren't, right.
Mhm.
But the thing I would say is that when someone who is in that position has a kid, and they've got better odds when they're throwing the dice, they're not replacing another kid. Like, all
Mhm.
those other kids are already going to be born. They're just
Yep.
adding on top.
Yep.
So it's not like they're
No.
not counteracting any bad. They're just
Well, mm,
adding
I
stuff.
disagree. I think they are
Okay,
counteracting the bad, but they're not replacing someone, but they're
okay, I
coming into
didn't.
the
Yeah, yeah,
world
yeah.
to take them
It
on,
was a
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It was a misspeak. I
Okay,
When I
okay.
said counteracting bad, I meant like,
Replacing.
yeah, replacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. So I would say, yeah, they're adding on. They're not replacing. But the other thing is, I think you're viewing procreation as, like, when you said you die and your influence stops,
Mhm.
unless you have a kid, I just don't think that's true. Like, if you
Okay.
died tomorrow,
Mm.
all of your work would still be online. The people you've influenced would all still be there. If Gary Yourofsky died tomorrow,
Okay.
he would still have the influence he's already had, but
I
to
can
my
change
knowledge,
that.
he hasn't had a
I
kid.
can change that then. That's an easy one to change. I mean, eventually it will die out. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, the legacy won't last that long unless you were someone really fucking important. Especially
I
today's world with all the information going around, you know?
d I'd okay, eventually it might fizzle out to something that's very small and spread out, but, like,
You will disappear, man. You will disappear in one generation. Nobody will know your name.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No one will know about you directly, but your impact will live on through. Okay,
We're gonna
so
clash here because I totally disagree. I
no,
think
no, no, because No, because okay, so let's take Gary Yoffsky as an example. Like, he if he dies tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Within what, 2, 3 generations, his name will not be known
No.
anymore. Even he'll still have like a Wikipedia page and
Yeah.
stuff so people can find him,
Yep.
but people won't really know about him anymore. But the people he's influenced to become vegan, they will influence people, and there'll be
Mm.
ripples and ripples and ripples, and they will become less and less connected to him, but none of them would have existed unless he'd done that work. And that will
Alright.
keep on going for generations and
True.
generations and generations.
True. And guess who's finding his work? People who are good and looking to be good in the world. And guess who they were most likely birthed by? People who were good, looking to do good in the world. So it all works together, man. This is it's all necessary.
I don't think necessarily so. Like, I think a lot of people can change when they like. I would say, yeah, people who are more empathetic and stuff are more likely
Yeah.
to take up that message, but not always, right? Like, if I take myself as an example, I was very like small-minded, like not really thinking about things in empathetic ways. But when I became vegan, it completely changed my worldview.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I wasn't raised in a bad way or in an
Your your
unempathetic
parents
way
were
or
raised
whatever.
you as a little selfish shitbag.
But, like, if you met me, like, 10 years ago, you would not think that is someone who's gonna become vegan. Like, I just wasn't that sort of person, but I, like, completely changed. So,
Well, that's
but
because
I would
sorry, yeah, go on. I'm sorry. I don't wanna keep
no,
cutting you up.
but I would agree with you that people who are raised in a more empathetic way are more likely to
Mhm,
become vegan, but I don't think it's the whole, picture. I think people come to it in different ways,
mhm,
and I think even though, like, like, other people are gonna procreate, like, whether we like it or not, and so what's the most effective thing that we can do if we're viewing this just through activism?
right.
Like, having, like, 1 or maybe 2 kids who may or may not do good in the world, or
Mhm.
putting in as much effort as we can
Yeah.
ourselves, with, like, the time and money that we would have put into raising a kid, which is a lot of years and a lot of money,
Mhm.
we could do a lot more things to, spread good ideas, benefit other people, but also, you were saying, like, people who are not empathetic and want to do good in the world have
Mhm.
kids that are unempathetic and do or more likely to have, but we can change those chances, right? Like,
Mhm.
the more we can help people live in better conditions, the less they will have to think about, oh, I've got to chase this day to day, blah, 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 blah. Like, the more we can improve the situation for others, we can hopefully make it so that they then can have more time to do good in the world and stuff like that, or increase their capacity, if you get what I mean.
Right, but you're assuming they would even want to. This is what I'm trying to say. Most people are not interested in it, not because they're surviving, but because they're selfish. Because they actually, it's not about survival, it's about getting more and more and more for themselves. Most people fall into that category. I want a house. I want a car. I want a family. I want this. That most people don't do a thing apart from maybe they'll give a couple of quid to someone at the shops, a little charity box or something, maybe, and then they'll be, oh, that's me, But they don't do it because they care. They do it because they feel obliged. They do it to feel good, and that's most people. What I'm talking about, and also the thing you said about your parents raising you, and then you would not have been you wouldn't expect you to be a vegan. Thing is, that's a different generation. Your parents were from a different generation. Now, if your parents had if your parents were good people and thought, they taught you good lessons, these days they would be vegan. This is, and oh, not these days, maybe 10, 20, 30 years from now, though your parents 10, 20, 30 years from now having you would be vegan parents. This is the
Mm.
world that we're heading towards. This is what this is what I want to get towards. It's a tipping point. We'll reach a tipping point where we'll have a world where most people are vegan and empathetic to others, but we won't get to that tipping point if all those people stop having kids. Because although I agree with what you said, that yes, leaving a legacy of information is important, and that's important too. And it's harder to do that if you have kids. There also needs to be some people that make that sacrifice and have kids so that they can
Yeah,
take the lessons and otherwise the only people getting the lessons will be the ones that were really hard to convince, like
yeah,
the
but
hardcore meat eater who won't listen to a vegan. Like we don't want a world full of that.
yeah, 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 yeah. But, like, so you were just saying that, if my parents are from a different generation, et cetera, which
Yeah.
that that points to the fact that as conditions change, it can unlock things in people that will make them more likely to be empathetic or do good things, right? And
Mhm.
that's what I'm saying. It's like we're at a point in time now where I think it's fairly obvious that it would be way more effective to try and unlock those things in other people than to have just one or two other kids. Like in the grand scheme of
Right.
things, one or two kids that you can create
We're
does jack shit, but you can
yeah.
reach now with the internet and social media like millions of
Yes.
people, right? If you really put your mind to it.
We're on the same page here, though. Like, I'm saying that your parents, for their generation, were the kind of good people that I'm talking about. I'm not saying I'm saying that we need to consider that the way they raised you. Clearly, look at you. They were good people. They did a good job, right? Now, these are the types of people that like are most likely going to listen to an antinatalist because they raised someone like you. I would assume that they care, right? That otherwise, how did you come out being such a caring person, right? Although it's not always the case, don't get me
Yeah,
wrong,
yeah.
it's not always the case. We assume that because that's how the majority of it goes. Maybe I'm
Mm.
wrong. Maybe you're going to tell me that they're horrible people. I don't know, but I would say that like that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, I'm not saying that they're part of
Yeah.
the bad crowd here. I'm saying I assume they're part of the good crowd that I would like to keep having babies, basically, because we
Mm.
want more people like you in the world to do more good, as well as the ones who don't have babies and do the good. I think there's a solution that needs both. The solution needs both. Is what I'm trying to say.
Mm. Yeah, I think just to bring it back to antinatalism itself, like I
Sure.
do think whilst it's good to have the conversation about what is the most effective thing of bringing about change and doing
Mm.
good in the world, I think that we also do need to recognize that like if we like viewing kids as a form of activism is one maybe not the best way to view kids,
It's
but also
not
we've got to
though.
recognize that we're chucking them on like a body pile when we do that, right?
It's
Like,
I don't think that's what I'm saying here. You know, look, at the end of the day, you don't want human extinction, so it is necessary to procreate. And that is a fact of life. If you don't want human extinction, this needs to happen. End of story. So who better to do it than the ones who understand this concept? Who better to roll the dice? That's what I'm saying.
mm,
It's not an
I
activism
think,
thing. It's just like it's just that we don't die out, basically. At the basic level, it's necessary. And then you go on top of that with all the stuff you've said. We want to help other beings. We want to do more work. That's when we get into the weeds and we're like, oh, is this activism? Well, not really. We're just trying to keep the world going towards a good point where because we want everyone to be better off. I don't consider that as an act of activism. I do not
mm,
consider that an act of it's a I don't know. I suppose activism makes it sound cold and calculated. I would say it's more grand than that. It's trying to create a better world and better situation for everyone. We're trying to help everyone here, basically. And I guess
mm.
in your world, he's kind of using a kid as a vessel for that or something like. However, they're going to be part of this change. They're not being used. They are it. You know. So yeah, but yeah, I
Yeah,
get what you mean.
yeah, I just I think it's difficult to have this conversation
Yeah.
when we don't have like like no one's done a study on actually how much does it change have like we don't know like how much does it change over time
Right.
cultural not because that's basically what we want to change, right? Like cultural norms,
Oh,
because like most people don't think critically about things, and so we want the culturally received things that they
yeah.
have to be better basically so that they don't have to do the thinking for themselves. um so
So
we want to like change the cultural norms so that they're a lot better. And is the best way to do that to just be another person that pumps out another kid,
but you okay. I don't like
or
the way
is
you're
it
phrasing it. I feel like that's
but that
like
is what you're
it's
doing.
inflammatory, but it's not though, because you're not just another person. You're another person with a view of the world, and you want to help others. You're not just another random Joe who selfishly goes out
Mm,
and just, "Whoa, I just want to save up for a house and I don't want to do anything for anyone." You are the opposite of that. You're the polar opposite. So you're not just another person. You're far better than that. You're someone who really cares. So I feel like it's a little bit of a yeah. I don't think that's necessarily the right way to put it. I know that that
yeah.
that looks well and good on a tweet. I'll give you that. It looks good on a tweet. But in this case, and I would agree with you most of the time. But in this case, I don't. I think we've got to the point where we know that's not true. You know,
Mm,
we're not just another mindless person pumping out a baby. If you've listened to this, you're already not that. Like, if you're paying
mm,
attention,
mm,
if you got to 1 hour 24 minutes, you don't fall into that category clearly because you're paying attention, you're learning, and you're interested in creating a better world. You're already part of 0.01% of the human population. So congrats, by the way. Thank you.
mm.
That's a pretty, it's a pretty amazing thing if someone's gone this far and actually listened and agrees, with what, or at
Yeah.
least is interested. I mean,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
if anyone does know any research for how,
right.
um, sort of moral progress in a society happens, whether because it's difficult to understand what pushes it forward. Is it just the sort of generational by generational change over time, this sort of
Mm.
incremental thing of like the next person is born and they push it a bit forward and da 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 da? Or is it pushed forward by individual sort of pioneers who sort of stick out from everyone else? Because I think that is maybe, or it could be both. It could be, it could be a
Probably.
mixture of both.
I'm sure some social
Um,
scientists can figure this out, some social psychologists.
yeah.
For now, though, we can put that behind us actually if you want, because I guess it's we're not going to get that data right now. But I do have one more
Yeah.
question for you,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
you're
Go
up
on.
for
Yeah.
it. You up for that? Is that cool?
Yeah. 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 Go
All
for
right,
it. Yeah.
cool. So this one, so I know we've got to the point now where actually the human stuff is not the focus for you anymore. However, I still have the question that I asked you this privately, and I want to bring it up. So we talked earlier. Okay, let's go through your original points again. Like, obviously, we've kind of moved away from the human stuff. Let's get back to it now. We can kind of finish as we started and focus on the human side of things. Um, so you talked about specifically the obligation to not procreate if you 100% know for a certainty that that person is going to have a mostly negative life, or all
Yeah.
negative, even like just bad, just suffering, cruelty, just a
Yeah.
horrible existence, most likely, right? Or health issues, and debilitating stuff, maybe that you guaranteed that they're going to die of starvation or thirst or blah blah blah. These are
Yeah.
all situations where you would say you are compelled, you're obligated to not procreate. So what I want to know is then, for the antinatalists who are human focused, they're not interested in animal stuff, they're only human focused. Why is their focus on affluent, Western educated people? Because where I see them pop up the most, or maybe not Western, but at least the academically minded
Yeah.
people who versus going to parts of the world, which I won't say where because people might think I'm some kind of racist, but like specifically, just go this part here. Tell them to stop reading. No, but like, why is the focus not on the
Mm,
severe, where there's severe poverty, where people, any baby born into these severe poverty areas is guaranteed a life of suffering and an early
mm.
death? Why is antinatalism not 100% focused there, rather than focused on someone in Manchester, for
Yeah, yeah,
example?
yeah. So I think the first thing to do is just separate out antinatalism from antinatalists. Like antinatalism doesn't
Okay.
focus on any particular, but it's specific antinatalist, or
Right.
there's a
Right.
general culture, right? So I think there's a couple reasons, and I'm not saying it's good that they do this. I'm just saying I think this is why they do it.
Okay.
The first one is I think most of the people that are doing antinatalist activism,
Yep.
which is separate from just being an antinatalist, most of the people that do activism, at least from what I've seen, tend to be in Western affluent countries.
Yep.
And so they're going to do stuff where they are. The second thing is we might have a bias because we are both from Western affluent countries
Mm.
and generally move in those circles. We probably see those people more. So
Mm.
that might be another thing.
Mhm.
Um, and also, a third thing is that the type of activism that people do,
Yep.
maybe make us bias,
Right.
because in affluent countries, people tend to be more used to going out on the streets, holding up a sign or something like that,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Whereas if someone wanted to help people in less affluent countries, they tend to donate to a charity, and
Right.
that is not something that you tend to visually see because it's just a bank like transaction, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of antinatalists do, well, I don't know about a lot, but like one
Mhm.
of the forms of activism antinatalists do is donate to charities that help people in less affluent countries so that it will lower birth
Right.
rates.
Right.
That is one form of, but it's not as visual as going out on the streets, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I do feel like I mean I will trust that that's what's going on. However, I still intuitively I've seen, from what I've seen from certain people and the kind of
Yeah.
messages I've seen, especially in like vegan groups when antinatalism comes up, it doesn't seem like that's what the case is. It seems like it's a lot of posturing, a lot of virtue
Mm.
signaling, and trying to get people, like I said, the kind of people that should be having kids, in my opinion, to not have kids versus and not apply. And if their argument is what your argument is about the, if it's mostly bad, I mean, isn't that an obligation to not have a? Well, here it's. I mean, these some of these places is a guarantee that that child is going
Yeah.
to have a horrible short life. So I don't get why these people are not focusing here. And the same thing comes up with, so for example, Black Lives Matter as another key example. As far as I can see, not one person I've ever seen who supports BLM, has BLM in their bio, or puts BLM on their Instagram bio or Twitter or whatever, posting about North African slavery, which is as far, I think it's the most slaves that have ever existed ever. No, wait, that's not true. It basically
It's slaves that existed at any one time, I
exactly,
think.
yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. Exist now, right? More than ever exist now in North Africa, and they're not white, okay? They're black. So if Black Lives Matter, then and the argument is that, this, okay, but maybe it should be renamed to African American Lives Matter, because clearly, there are issues going on that people ignore. And I feel like antinatalism also falls into this trap sometimes. Well, not antinatalism, the people who are supporters, antinatalists, they fall into this trap of not focusing where their logic tells you that it should be focused the most. I
Mm.
don't understand how that happens, and that's not. I mean, and I got to be honest with you, that kind of included you though, because until recently, with this new revelation that you're going to focus on animals, you were focusing on all of your statements, and everything was focused on the West. That's why I asked you this question. So I'm just kind of trying to understand the logic.
What was it focusing mostly on the West? I feel like the stuff I was putting out was sort of like neutral. I mean, it was received mostly by people in the West just
Yes,
because 'cause I'm Western. Like, I can't
exactly.
really help that.
You
Like,
can though, dude. You absolutely can.
how? What am I gonna go to Zimbabwe and like
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what you stand for. Like you are I mean, obviously, I understand the argument, we can only, we have limited reach and stuff, but in the modern world, not really. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could have a monstrous impact in other parts of the world. You put your effort in, like you got Zoom
I
now, Skype. There's ways to connect and
mm.
communicate.
So I think that is where like a disproportionate amount of our effort should end up, but
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that directly the message should be going there because like think about it this way. The people in the West tend to have more resources at their disposal, right?
yeah,
And so they can donate to places that help the people in poorer areas. So rather than go directly to those places and try and convince them not to have kids, which let's be honest, is probably going to be as hard as convincing someone in the West not to have kids because people want to have kids.
yeah.
Um, it's probably more effective to donate to charities that have been shown to be effective in bringing down birth rates there, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so, I mean,
Do
I
you
can post. Yeah, I do, yeah, yeah.
okay
I donate 10% of, like, all of the money I get
to
to,
specifically those charities? That's really
n
interesting. I didn't
no,
know.
I donate to other
Yeah,
charities as
okay.
well, like, those are some of the so I donate to, like, animal charities as well, but, like, some of them go to ones to lower yeah.
Would you say that that's the situation? Not like to
It's not the widespread
right.
situation in antinatalism generally,
Okay.
but I think
Okay.
it should be, which is why I'm trying to promote that message
Yep.
more,
Yep.
but
Yep.
also and this is more of a tactical thing on my part, like,
Mm.
you referenced my tweets and stuff earlier and the message I'm putting out, like
Yeah.
a lot of that is to build a following, right? Like and you know about this, so,
Do you know what's great
like
about this is that, like, I totally mugged you off because, like, for people watching, so he started a Twitter, and some of his tweets are a bit like, a little bit like vanilla, and I said, "Lawrence, mate, you need to get more spicy," and now he's done it, and now I'm here being like, "Well, you didn't put me holding it against you."
When also you're the one who convinced me to start a Twitter in the first place, so it wouldn't even exist without you.
That's so mean. I just realized that. So I pretty much you might feel like I've been planning this. Oh, I'm gonna get him to do a Twitter, and I'm gonna nail him down on the Western stuff. That is hilarious. But no, I mean, the reason I brought it up is not to try and nail you to the cross. It's more to understand. I because I saw it with BLM stuff, and I've seen it with all sort of
Yeah.
feminist stuff, like you know, um,
They
Some of these
prioritize the wrong things.
completely the wrong things
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Sometimes it's so far wrong. I'm sat here and I'm like, are you serious? And I felt not to the same extent though with antinatalists, but still to a certain extent, like, is this not a case here? And not as I've seen
mm,
more extreme examples in feminism, to be honest with you. Like I saw some stuff about there was some kind of products being too expensive. Some like women, like healthcare products, like women's healthcare products, and people were really upset because they were like, I don't know, like 9% more expensive than the male equivalent or something. Or, for example, when celebrity actresses get paid less than actors,
yeah,
this stuff. I'm like, is this the hill you want to die on,
yeah,
right? So I don't think this is quite at that level, and the BLM stuff isn't at that level either. To be fair, that the stuff BLM spoke about is very important. My argument is just that, when there's an African slave trade still existing today, why is that not the focus? I mean, should that not be it? And the same with antinatalism. When there's clearly the most suffering is here, why is the effort not there? That's what I was trying to get
yeah.
to, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think uh I think a lot of and I think, to be honest, I think this goes with basically every movement. Like, most movements that are trying to do good in the world tend to do activism that is emotionally gratifying,
Right. That's true. Yeah.
or fit into what has just been done anyway. It's just sort of like a status quo bias.
Yeah.
They don't actually think, let's measure the impact of what we're doing and let's see actually how effective it is.
Right.
And if what we're doing at the moment isn't effective, let's change gears and try something else.
Mm, mm.
And that is a message I'm trying to promote, which I got from when I had my conversation with John.
Right.
Like, that is something that I'm going to try and promote more in the
Makes
future
sense.
for antinatalism, because
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people trying to do good in the world.
Mm,
But I think one thing they're missing out is that actually just not creating someone in the first place
mm.
is a way of preventing suffering. And I want to try and introduce that tool to the toolkit, or whatever you
Right.
want to put it,
Yeah.
of people's activism. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Unless they're an incredibly empathetic, well-meaning, kind
Yeah,
person,
then you have 5.
then you have 5. That's funny. Oh,
Yeah, and
man.
that's the bit that David's gonna clip.
Yeah. This was cool, man. I think there's more we could talk about, but I actually I don't think we should go on for, like, people
Yeah.
won't watch it for all the whole thing if we ramble on for too long.
Yeah, yeah.
I think this
Well,
is
we can always do a second one, like, if
yeah.
you want. It's up to you. I'm open.
Yeah, no, this has been great though. I think this has been it's been really useful for me, and, I think yeah, I think people will find it useful too, so I
Yeah.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah, but yeah, like, just in case, because I think the one thing that is maybe still unclear, and this is nothing to do with you, this is just
Oh,
me saying something,
yeah.
is about, like, so someone might be thinking, "Oh, Lawrence, if you think
Ooh.
the priorities lie else oh, Lawrence, if you think the priorities lie elsewhere, why do you talk so much about human procreation in all of your videos and stuff?" And
Yeah,
I would say 2 things. Like, 1, I'm hoping to shift, like, more towards the other side in the things I do. Well, 3 things. 1, I'm hoping to shift away from that somewhat in the future. Second of all, the stuff I put out on social media is not everything I do. I do other stuff in the background which works on these other priorities.
good point.
And 3, um like, I do it to build a following. Like, the larger following I have, the more good I can hopefully do, right?
Yep,
And so, like I said, like, people tend to focus on stuff that is emotionally gratifying, and if I can somewhat use that, I hope I'm not coming across as manipulative. Like, I still,
right,
everything I put on social media, I believe in.
yep,
I just, it may not just necessarily be the most pressing thing, but I still believe in it. But
yep,
if putting it out on social media is going to help build a following that in the long run I can use to do more good,
yep.
then yeah.
I agree. No, totally makes sense. Like, I have the same thing with when I put stuff out. Like, is everything I put out, particularly changing the world, like the most important thing right now, ever? No, I put a lot of stuff out. I even put a lot of mockery out and mocking, meat eaters and stuff like that. It's probably not, but yeah, there's a separate goal,
Yeah.
and potentially maybe some of the people I've mentioned just now have that same like goal. Maybe some people from other movements. I don't think at all. Sometimes it's the case for sure, but I don't think always it is. But yeah, really good point, actually, and I'm glad you brought it up because it is important people realize that not every
Yeah.
action is taken on face value. Like sometimes it's a separate goal, right? And
Yeah,
you need to
yeah, yeah.
realize that. Yeah, like yeah, we can go into that's a vegan topic, even a really good vegan topic. We can get into a
Yeah,
different. You
yeah.
can come on my channel and do it.
Yeah, yeah, I'll be down for that. Right, nice. Well, do you wanna quickly plug again,
Yeah.
like, where people can find you,
So I'm
and then we can close?
Yeah, I'm David Rams on YouTube, right here on YouTube, and the Rams Den on YouTube, also the second channel. David Rams on Instagram. It's David Rams on Twitter. Come and follow and like and share stuff, and I don't know, get triggered if you really want. The second channel, there's definitely some stuff on there that might upset some viewers. So yeah, there you go. That's a reason to go watch it. Go and see if you can upset yourself on my second channel. Um, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, and if you don't already subscribe to Lawrence, if you're watching this from my work and you're coming over to Lawrence and subscribe, I think it could be worth it. And that's yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Yeah, and we do, like, some videos together on your
We do.
second channel, right? So,
Yeah, we
yeah,
do.
yeah,
We
people
do.
can yeah,
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 of
yeah.
course. Yeah, if you want to see more Lawrence, he's on my channel too, second channel. Yeah, go check it out.
Mm. Right, sick. Well, thanks for grilling me. I feel, what is it called? When you, well done.
Well done. Nice.
Yeah,
Happy
yeah,
to
yeah,
hear it. Burnt to a
yeah.
crisp.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, cheers for coming on. We'll do another one
Cool.
if, if it's, like, warranted and you've got more, like, you wanna ask and stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, I think we covered some good ground, so nice one.
Cheers.